Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. It is September 11th. This time, September 11th, 2023. Oh, I don't know. Time for us to wade through equal parts. Social media will feed us equal parts, like truly heartrending, never forget messages, but also, well, we should probably also never forget how many never forget messages were offered up to us in the guise of never forget messages, but were in fact commercial advertising or other wholly inappropriate, and I mean wholly inappropriate Batman kind of way, wholly inappropriate supposed remembrances. It's an amazing anniversary for things like that. There's plenty of other things going on. Of course, we're wrapped up in the middle of everything else in the world going on all at once, and Congress returning to try to, supposedly, to try to avoid a government shutdown. Never forget that, apparently. But I'm just looking at the things that people are reminding me that happened, you know, way back when. Lots of remembrances, but now the remembrances have turned into remembrances of remembrances, if you know what I mean. And if you don't, I will refer you to something I saw, oh boy, early this morning. Let's see where this chain of blue sky, what do they call them? Skeets, I think. I can't even get into the terminology of this one, but reminding everybody of, the semi-commercial but wholly corny remembrances. I guess somebody started with, it's Fane Greenwood. So to give proper credit where credit is due here, just saying, does any object better summarize the modern American soul? Maybe not. Than this $54 9/11 Christmas ornament that inexplicably has a duck on it, and you have to see it to believe it, but it's a duck head. Maybe it was, during the height of the Duck Dynasty popularity as my only explanation for this one, but a duck head. Or maybe it was also, could have been sold by Ducks Unlimited, whatever. Anyway, the point is that there's a duck head and then a billowing American flag and then a little thing here that says, I don't know, they added a little something on there so they could write remembering 9/11/01 on it so that it wasn't just a duck and a flag, you see. And then Fane goes on to point out that you could, in fact, decorate an entire Christmas tree with 9/11 themed ornaments, a thing that I would absolutely be tempted to do if I had the space. And here are 4 equally corny looking Christmas ornaments. Some a little dumber than others, but I don't know, maybe the most amazing, I don't know, sort of, is Santa Claus dressed as a firefighter and holding an American flag. There are some that prominently feature the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, etc., but that's one of the more amazing things. But then Dr. Brooke Magnanti responds with, someone should make an ornament out of this classic pin with a photo, I don't know where it came from, but like a lapel pin kind of thing, put out by none other than the famous rememberer of 9/11, Hooters restaurants. This one also prominently featuring the Twin Towers, although this one with a stylized 9 in front, using the Twin Towers as the 11. When I say stylized 9, I mean it's a 9 drawn with sort of a reference to the elongated, not windows, but the channels that ran along the World Trade Center. It's meant to look similar to it, to evoke the picture right next to it of the Twin Towers. So 9/11 Hooters remembers, which is, let's say, wholly unnecessary, obviously. I mean, whatever. And by the way, they did a great job reproducing the O, the way they use the O's in Hooters to suggest something, remembrance oriented. obviously. But what's amazing to me is that they also snuck in this one, which is like, I mean, really, that somebody at corporate headquarters somewhere was like, yeah, Hooters should have a 9/11 remember 9/11 pin for sure. But let's not miss the opportunity to throw in a tagline there so that it now reads, Hooters remembers, let freedom wing. Because, of course, we serve chicken wings. And everybody needs to know that. You can't miss an opportunity. I mean, people may want to remember and commiserate over wings, so don't miss the chance to tell them that we have wings. And, of course, don't miss the chance to tell them what you can see at Hooters, you know, the featured product at Hooters by using our stylized double O's, as a matter of fact, in Hooters. You know, these things happened. And so you'll get berated today for not, you know, properly remembering or properly memorializing something. But I don't know. They won't be out there berating Hooters, I assure you. Anyway, it's really most astonishing to see things like this. But to remember that they went on is important. And also, somebody reminding me here, who says this? GRG. Who's GRG? GRG is, oops, I gotta answer the phone here. Hang on just a second. Let's see. Oh, no further, identifier there, but this person sending out the message. You can try all you want tomorrow, but you'll never do a 9/11 post better than the guy running the official Saudi Arabia infographic Twitter account getting so mad that he threatened to do another 9/11, this time to Toronto. And it is using a tweet from Tobias Schneider because the infographic itself, that tweet has since been deleted. I think they acted pretty quickly on that one. But Tobias pointing out, now deleted. Here's a screenshot of the threatening Saudi infographic featuring an airliner headed for the Toronto skyline. Yeah, I remember this one happening for sure. They were very upset because, as I had to read up again and find out what this was about. The Canadians were officially making some sort of protest about human rights violations in Saudi Arabia. And the Saudi government responded with, as the Arabic saying goes, he who interferes with what doesn't concern him finds what doesn't please him. Sticking one's nose where it doesn't belong, it says in the infographic, and then shows an Air Canada jet heading towards, threatening the buildings of the skylines of Toronto. That's astonishing that you were able to do that and then delete it and then have everybody forget it. But as you know, everybody remembers because we're always admonished never to forget 9/11 and everything that has to do with it. So it's a difficult and complicated day and always has been. And we're on to the 22nd of them. So, all right, let's get into various other markings of the day plus news elsewhere. Good morning, Greg. How are you? Are you remembering? You are remembering, probably.
Well, it's hard not to. I mean, I lost 4 friends there. I am so attuned to not watching cable TV on September 11th or 12/14 because of Newtown. You just skip over them, you know. But if you're going to remember anything, remember the falling man. Remember the people who jumped out of the buildings, the sanitized stuff that they don't show anymore. Everything is all heroic and music and this
it is
and
interesting
that and everything
how,
else. It's all bullshit.
How they don't feel like remembering some significant portion of it, and probably the most
horrible,
important part.
And the falling man, which was a Richard Drew picture taken for the Associated Press and memorialized in Esquire. The falling man, an unforgettable story, except everybody forgets it and doesn't really go over it. The horror of that day is real. And if you don't remember it that way, that's fine. Everybody has to get through it the way they can.
Yeah, well, with 20 of them under our belts, there's generations that remember it
people
entirely
don't like
differently.
Remember horrible. I mean,
sure.
You know, if you remembered every exact moment of childbirth, people wouldn't have children.
Probably. I can't believe you did that to me. Well, that's how you got here. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
Or you know, I remember the one thing I remember from the birthing ward is the lady yelling, you did this to me. You did this.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, but that's humanity. That's, you know, how people respond. So there's that. That's all I'm going to say about it.
All right.
The news is pretty interesting. This week is going to be some politics, dominated probably by the House and Kevin McCarthy's fecklessness and lack of pith. He's not pithy. He's pithless.
All right.
And, also exactly all of the legal maneuverings for the various and sundry conferences before this and that judge regarding Donald Trump and the 19 co-defendants and the 75 unindicted co-conspirators and the entire Republican Party and everybody else who was involved with January 6th.
Yeah, the other date we have to
refer to that's the third date, and all of them are important. All of them need to be remembered in their own way. But January 6th needs to be memorialized with a couple of convictions. Yes.
Well, we're working on it.
And we are, and we're working towards it. So all of that is true. So let's start. Is Joan going to be on this week?
I don't know. I have to check in with her. She's been having lingering COVID bugging her for quite a while now.
Yeah. If she can get on, that would be good. Because
she did make it on for like 10 minutes last week.
There's a lot going on in the house that I can't explain.
Okay. Well, we'll see if she can squeeze it into a segment or two.
Not that you couldn't explain it, but still.
No, well, why would I?
We're going to talk a lot about jam.
Could. Okay. Yeah. Would you please
jelly
pass
or jam?
The jelly?
Jamming.
Right.
It's what does it mean? It means when the House is dysfunctional, as it often is these days, the Senate puts on its big boy pants and big girl dresses and says, okay, we're going to, in a bipartisan way, pass the spending bills you guys should have done. You won't like it as much because we're going to do it our way, but we are going to do it, and you're not. So at the very end, with time running out, it's ours or nothing, and you can't have nothing. That's unacceptable. And so you'll have to pass what we're doing with Democratic votes. So in the end, you not only get jammed, you get embarrassed. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going on. That's the end game. Everything else is a dance between now and then.
Yeah. Senate jamming. It's not like a formal term or anything, but it tends to get used because it adequately describes it. Yeah, they use it.
John Thune said we're going to jam them.
Yeah. But I will point out that the Senate, structured the way as it is, frequently will also try jamming the House when it's the Senate that is dysfunctional and the House that's working. They still they run the same play anyway. So it's worth remembering. You'll see if you finally learn about it or you figure out exactly what's going on in 3-4 years, we'll be back here again, and it'll be the House that's working, and the Senate that is outrageously out of whack.
This is the classic, the other party is the opposition, and the other house is the enemy.
Yeah, they really. It's a weird thing and a weird dynamic and rivalry of sorts, and I guess originally the founders probably thought that would work to everyone's advantage, but it
does when you have members of both party leading.
Well, it can certainly, yeah. Like everything, it's got its ups and downs. I guess we'll just say that. All right, but right now I'm for the upside of it.
Well, so here's a Punch Bowl, for example. Disaster relief in Ukraine supplemental. The White House wants $16 billion for natural disasters in Hawaii, Florida, Vermont, and elsewhere. Florida being a red state, doesn't matter. $24 billion for Ukraine. McCarthy's plan is to add disaster money to a continuing resolution, otherwise known in Washington speak as a CR.
Right.
And then try to extract border policy changes and additional funding, and seems like a fine plan until you realize you can't do it. Impeachment is McCarthy's biggest political dilemma. He's stuck between the two wings of his conference here. They acknowledge they don't have the votes for an impeachment inquiry. But if he doesn't do it, then the right wing is, and a playbook goes into this much more than Punch Bowl. The right wing is this time really seriously threatening getting rid of McCarthy.
Okay.
And they keep telling him, your team is not paying enough attention to this. We're serious here.
That is a great time to do it. Perfect timing in the middle of a government funding crisis. You want to definitely avoid the shutdown by vacating the speakership. Right in the middle.
There's a couple other minor things on the menu, too, like the FAA needs to be reauthorized. And, there's all sorts of stuff. They have to figure out what to do about George Santos. Chris Stewart, Republican Utah, is going to be leaving office to deal with family issues. Steve Scalise is in chemotherapy. George Santos is going to be pleading guilty. Frank Lucas had hip surgery. So in other words, bare majority, and he's going to miss a bunch of his people that might have voted with him. So McCarthy's like in deep doo-doo this week.
All right. That sounds exciting. He's got a lot of fun challenges to look ahead to.
Right. And the way Political Playbook puts it is not only does McCarthy have a mess, but hanging over everything in bolded, italicized letter, not capitalized, but just short of, is a brewing challenge from the right to Speaker McCarthy. Conservative hardliners who only reluctantly backed him have spent weeks hearing from unhappy constituents back home. Many who are itching for a funding fight and salivating over an impeachment of President Joe Biden. I guess the House still has landlines. And McCarthy's plan for the fall, punting a funding fight into December while letting his committee chairs dig into Biden, is not passing muster with his critics, some of whom are openly threatening a motion to vacate, which we've gone over the show ad nauseum. That is to say, to oust McCarthy if he cuts a deal with Democrats, which is what he's going to have to do to keep the government open. So what we're looking at is he's going to have to cut a deal with Democrats at some level. And so the right wing's going to try to get rid of him. Hello.
All right. It'll be funny, in a way, sort of impeach Joe Biden. The first one to get bounced is Kevin McCarthy.
So the funny fight could come to a head this week, says Politico. Awesome. With the House set to consider the Pentagon spending bill, it's chock full of goodies for conservatives, should be the easiest bill to clear, and the hardliners are already threatening to block it.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Well done.
Now, one problem for McCarthy is conservatives are demanding things he can't easily give. I hate that Politico and these other inside the beltway things even treat any of their demands as reasonable. But he's demanding things he can't easily give. They're demanding things that are ridiculous and radical. That's how you should put it. Slash discretionary spending levels, defunding DOJ, zeroing out cabinet member salaries. Don't treat this as if this is normal.
Yeah, that's true. They missed the opportunity, except that they're not really looking for that opportunity.
Right. But the bigger problem he's facing is that after an 8-month honeymoon, he risks becoming a target of the GOP's conservative base, just like John Boehner, Paul Ryan, and Mitch McConnell before him. Yeah.
Well, how long did you think a honeymoon was going to last? 8-month honeymoon. What are you talking about?
Usually 100 days, right? We spoke last night with several conservatives, including one who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe rising discontent with McCarthy. There's enough support from the base to be like, look, if we're not going to get results from McCarthy, we can get the results from somebody else.
Well, no, you can't, but you're not going to get them from McCarthy. Yeah, you're right about that.
As they said about the Watergate people, and this will be repeated a lot, whether it's the Trump people on trial or whether it's the Republican House, you have to remember these people aren't very smart.
Yeah, that's true. So, all right, well, I don't know what to tell you. We have to sit here through this and watch.
Right. Well, McCarthy has few options, says Politico, and his critics are not sympathetic. There'll be blowback. I don't give a damn, said Chip Roy.
Oh, well. Chip Roy with the same initials. I'm staring, by the way. I wish you could find some way to market Colorado Rockies hats that say CR, but as continuing resolution. But we might as well just make them Chip Roy hats as well.
Yeah, Congress matters.
Yeah, but with an R somehow. Congress matters.
Matters.
Matters. Okay.
Yeah. Remands. So Adam Bass of Mass. Massachusetts reporter.
Good.
That's what he uses as his handle.
Very nice.
Hot take, while people crediting Biden would be a big plus for his campaign, and they do, because they're Democrats who like him, there's a lot of normies out there who just don't know. But having people just feel better about the economy is also a good result, and that's based on this new Wall Street Journal poll, or at least story about it. Voters feel better about the economy, but few credit Biden, polls find.
Okay.
Most Americans disapprove of president's economic policy. However, if you look at the story and you look at the rise in consumer sentiment, which of course flipped from it was great to it was terrible when Biden won for Republicans. And it flipped from it was okay to it's really good now for Democrats. You could see in the last few months rising consumer sentiment index with everybody, with independents, with Republicans, with Democrats. They acknowledge that the economy is getting better. The question is who gets credit. And Adam Bass said, if you feel better about the economy, you just don't feel as, horribly motivated to rush to the polls and crawl over glass to vote out the other guy. Whereas when you hate the economy, you do.
I guess. Yeah. All right. Or if there's no job standing in your way of going to vote, perhaps.
Right. And again, there's a while between here and there, but most of the professional economists are downgrading chances of a recession. So you could take a recession, yes, it's still out there. Yes, it still could happen. But, we're now talking 15%, not 40%. So, you want to leave it on the table because 15% isn't zero, fine. Yeah. You want to take it off the table because 15% and dropping means it's not going to happen, fine. Yeah, that's not going to be the major issue. What is going to be the issue is the price of eggs and housing. But more housing stock is being built, which is going to decrease the price of housing, which is also a good thing.
It's supposed to. I mean, that's what these economists get trained to say. I mean, we all understand supply and demand.
Yeah, and yet it's not just the polls, of course. Simon Rosenberg points this out and says a central reason I'm bullish on Biden and the Democrats, analysis from 538 found that in 38 special elections held so far this year, Democrats have outperformed the partisan lean by an average of 10%.
Okay. And
so there's actually a story about that. Somebody was complaining, I never see any stories about this in the regular media, but here's one. This is by Tal Axelrod for ABC News on August 5th, which is not that long ago, just last month. Years. Democrats are overperforming in 2023 special elections. Is it a clue for Biden versus Trump? And they talk to, of course, the usual culprits, anonymous Republican and Democratic strategists, who remain anonymous so that they could speak out. And you know what? They all think it's significant.
It's good that they think it's significant.
Even the Republicans say, we can't ignore this. This is like a big deal. Abortion really matters. And, of course, special and off-year elections aren't perfect predictors. Glenn Youngkin earned a surprise victory in 2021 before Democrats surprised everybody in 2022, for example.
Surprise, yeah.
But similar elections in 2017 and 2019 did precede Democratic successes in 2018 and 2020. And it isn't just one election like Youngkin's, which, again, Youngkin, of course, credits himself. But most people around say, well, Terry McAuliffe actually ran a pretty bad campaign.
Yeah, they do say that. And they feel it.
And they're right.
All right.
Anyway, I think you have to be very concerned, said one Republican. And, of course, then we have all the other stuff with Trump that's going to come in, and it's going to be all Trump, all legal stuff all the time. The more that happens in Georgia, the more that's on TV, so that matters too. Mm-hmm. Here's a source I don't usually do, but sometimes they have interesting things which are worth going over. Oh. This is from The Dispatch. Jonah Goldberg is trying to position himself between being a never-Trumper and not having anything to do with the current Republican Party. And, of course, that's a mighty struggle because there really isn't any in between. If you don't want to have anything to do with the current Republican Party, you have to be a never-Trumper because the Republican Party right now is Trump.
Yes.
And so this is future positioning, if you might put it that way. They're pre-positioning themselves for the day that the Republican Party becomes normal, which isn't going to happen.
Right. Although
it'll die before it becomes normal, and that's okay.
Probably, yeah. But I guess when Trump dies, there'll be a round of articles, trumpeting the new era, but everyone will be emulating him instead.
Right.
So.
Oren Kerr, who's a good legal analyst, conservative, but sometimes right, sometimes not, said, people are freaking out that Trump's going to be the nominee in 2024. Wait till he's the nominee in 2028.
Right. And spry 79, 82, whatever he's going to be then.
And I said, that's not going to happen. There's going to be death by hamburger before that happens.
It should be. But, his family sometimes hangs on way too long.
Well, you can't have it both ways. If Joe Biden is old and doddering and eats pablum and can't be given nutrients unless he's hand-fed, spoon-fed by somebody else, then you can't say, okay, well, Mitch McConnell can hang on as long as he wants to, and Donald Trump in 2028. Doesn't work that way.
Oh. Or it absolutely does work that way, and we can say whatever we want. So,
you can. It's not going to be.
I hope no one will believe it, but
in any case,
yes.
Back to the dispatch. Polling on Trump's cases shows two different universes. Republicans are rallying around their guy, and the general electorate thinks the indictments are legitimate.
Okay,
and that's true, and both can be true at the same time.
Well, sure, yeah. There's a group of people who are wrong, and then there's us who thinks the indictments are legitimate.
While it will likely still be months before former President Donald Trump goes on trial, two of his co-defendants in Fulton County will start their own trial next month. And there's still room to include Eastman with Chesbrough, who that's how he pronounces it these days, and Sidney Powell, the Kraken. Yeah. So Cheese and Kraken is going to be on the menu, and that's going to go in October. And, awesome. If there's a relatively quick conviction there, that would be fantastic, and it's televised. So I'm looking forward to that. That would be the best of all possible worlds. It could go other ways, of course, as these trials often do, because you can never predict what a jury will do. But Judge McAfee denied former Trump lawyer Powell and Chesbrough their request to be tried separately. So everybody's going to be tied to the nutcase. Yeah. And that would be Sidney Powell.
Yes.
Right? And you still have to wonder whether Cleta Mitchell is flipped because, she's not in any of this stuff. She was not in the special grand jury.
She's not
to any great extent.
She was named.
She's named, but not indicted, and right. She's disappeared off the earth. So much more than even Mark Meadows.
Yeah, which is amazing.
So I think she's flip-flopping.
Could be. She's coming back into the news via another angle, as it turns out, tied up as she is with Ginny Thomas and all the reporting that's coming out about the dark money organizations they've launched together. But, maybe we can't get her coming, we'll get her going. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Never forget that we're on Netroots Radio. I don't know. We got to say never forget about everything today. Doesn't matter. Never forget that Greg Dworkin is still here. We've got more to do, more to cover. Do you want to go back to the polls? Is that right?
I forgot what I was talking about.
You're not ever supposed to do that. But
no, we were talking on the break a little bit about something a little closer to home in Loudoun County, but Virginia's got these legislative elections coming up in November,
right?
And Glenn Youngkin is not running because he can't run again, but he's going after his legacy. So this is a legacy election. He wants to turn the entire state of Virginia red, and of course, Democrats don't want that to happen.
I do not.
And one of the interesting things about this is that court cases come up for discussion for Virginia. Court cases come up for discussion, of course, for the national election, and some of the polling analysis points that out. But the fact of the matter is that facts matter in a court of law. And every single time you go to a court of law and you have to go over the facts, the Republicans lose.
That is true. Right. Of course, you can only run for one term as governor in Virginia, so he won't be running again. But his term isn't quite over yet. But the midterm legislative elections are coming up here this year. So I guess he's trying to.
Well, he's made it about himself. Yeah. So if he loses,
that's what politicians
he loses.
Do. That's true. And what he's got on tap here for the poll juicing. At the moment is we've spent a considerable amount of time on the show on the story of what's happened in Loudoun County in front of the school boards, with the school board, with what's going on in schools, and Chris Rufo's role in all of this, and the protests of various kinds. And I've told in depth, because it's so close to home, the story of everybody, the opposing accusations, legal charges on both sides, even down to the point where beloved school board spokesperson Wade Byard, who all the kids and now adults love because for years, for generations, he's been the voice of school is closed for snow today phone calls, and he was brought up on charges by Republicans and the special prosecutors that they appointed, along with the school superintendent, because of course, there were the two attacks, a rape and a sexual assault, happened in, same perpetrator in Loudoun County schools. And then, of course, the furor at the school board meetings with arguments over how the school board and school administrators handled things and how they characterized what was going on, culminating in the father of the victim of one of these attacks getting essentially into a physical altercation at the school board meeting and getting himself arrested. And anyway, in all of this, today's news, Glenn Youngkin is issuing a pardon for this father who found himself arrested, but found himself, by the way, crossing the line and getting in trouble with the cops twice over this story. Once at the school when he showed up the day of the attack, and then once again at a school board meeting where he got in an altercation with other people attending the meetings. Now he's being pardoned, which doesn't disturb me a great deal because I think he's been caught up in a big political firestorm that he doesn't necessarily deserve to bear the brunt of all of it. But as you were saying, in court where the facts come out and you actually sort through these things, from the beginning, two stories have been told about what's going on here. One told by the Republicans that the Democrats were covering things up and liberals were forcing CRT into the classrooms, plus making us mask for no reason, and they were covering up sexual assaults and everybody should be fired and yada, yada, yada. And every court case they've brought so far has ended with the courts essentially saying, you're not right about this. If you're not absolutely wrong about it, you're definitely not right about it. Wade Byard was acquitted in like 10 minutes of jury deliberation, et cetera, et cetera. In the meantime, now comes the court date for Dad, who
Wade
fought
Byard
the cops.
is the voice of Snow Days?
Yes, right. The beloved Snow Day announcer, who was charged with, I think, what did they say, false publication. They had to come up with some weird, archaic statute to charge him with, because they said, well, he lied to the public about the way that the rape charges were investigated. And he didn't, and everybody knew it. And it was a political stunt to charge him, and it took 15 minutes to get rid of the charges. Now, the other side faces the possibility of, well, maybe you weren't telling the truth either. Let's get to the bottom of it. Glenn Youngkin jumps in the middle of this one and says, well, what if we didn't get to the bottom of this, actually? Because if it turns out that everybody finds out that we were lying the whole time and the basis of our election was a fraud, maybe that's not great for us. So why don't we just let all bygones be bygones? It's all water under the bridge. Let's not look into this. Everybody else had to pay for lawyers and go through their trial dates. I will also point out, by the way, since we're in the heat of the legislative election here, we have a state Senate race going on everywhere, but the one covering Loudoun County has been featuring dueling ads on TV over the last couple of days, in which the Republican candidate for the state Senate seat here is on the air with ads saying, he's going to be tough on crime and you need to elect me because in Loudoun County, the prosecutors aren't doing their jobs and they're letting people get away with crimes and they're not cracking down. They're not for law and order, and we're for law and order. And nobody's going to tell us that nobody's going to make us allow prosecutors to get away with dropping the ball on prosecutions. I wonder, though, what's interesting is, of course,
nobody's going to have a better ordered lawn than us.
Right. Yeah. So Youngkin drops in and pulls the rug out from under this guy and says, I am going to make sure that the Democratic county Commonwealth's attorney doesn't have a chance to prosecute the accused and doesn't have a chance to do their job by pardoning this guy. And as it turns out, when we've prosecuted everybody else, it's just not working anyway. And to hell with all of that. We're going to be tough on crime. There, of course, featured in the ad is the endorsement of the local sheriff for this Republican, saying, oh, the prosecutors aren't doing their jobs. They're letting all the violent criminals go. But Glenn Youngkin has just stepped in to pardon somebody who was arrested for assaulting police. So
and
that's going to be interesting.
Details are important, and local stuff matters. And, all of this is like, yes, but the economy and Hunter Biden. Well, there's a lot of stuff that goes into elections that, perhaps the national reporters don't really focus on. Like, for example, in Northern Virginia, traffic patterns matter. And if you're not covering that, you're not covering the election. Yeah.
So we got all sorts of complications. And it's going to be interesting to see Glenn Youngkin campaigning in a defund the police fleece vest.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
So
back to the Dispatch.
Yeah, right.
They're looking
Those
at all of this court stuff, all of this truth, all of this fact-finding. And they write about polling Trump's indictments. Why have the other Republican candidates for president proven neither willing nor able to go after the former president for multiple indictments? The assumption, based on both regular conversations with officials and from observing the obvious, is Republican primary voters don't care about Trump's legal votes. They think he's being unfairly targeted. And the recent Wall Street Journal poll put some more meat on that bone, finding the charges aren't giving GOP voters any second thoughts. But the survey also spells out how those indictments could cause Trump serious trouble in a general election because the majority of registered voters think the cases have merit, at least to this point.
Whoops.
That isn't the case among most self-described Republican primary voters. For example, on the Stormy Daniels hush money case in New York, which, as Joyce Vance always points out, is a serious indictment and felony, just not as serious as the others. 61% say the indictment is politically motivated without merit. On the Florida case, 67%. On the D.C. case, 70%. And on the Georgia case, 71%. So those that we think are the most important are the ones they dismiss the most.
Interesting.
Which is really amazing.
They should be denying them across the board by the same numbers. That is odd.
Yeah. And one more data. Well, the more it threatens them, the more they have to say, I've got pencils in my ears and I can't hear what you're saying because I'm humming to myself.
That's the only plausible takeaway from it, which is an amazing thing all by itself.
And one more data, which also means it's getting in, it's penetrating. They realize it.
Yeah.
They just can't admit it.
They're just pushing their fingers further into their ears.
One more data point from GOP primary voters. 56% say they are aware and are following the stories of the indictments very closely, with 31% saying they're following it somewhat closely. So that's like 85% are well aware of what's going on here. And they may lie to pollsters, and they may lie to themselves in the voting booth. You never know what they're going to do. But it's getting through. And some of them will stay home. Some of them will say, I'm just sick of it. And, there's another really, really super interesting statistic that came up, and I had this in the pundit roundup, and that is that there are breakdowns of how people view Biden versus Trump compared to how often you vote.
Okay.
All right. So, for example, Signal, which is a Republican tracking poll.
Yeah.
And they're looking at likely voters. Their model, these are all modeled of likely voters. They have Biden up 3.
All right.
And one thing to look at, that's not so interesting. One thing to look at is where we think turnout will eventually be, not the top line. Among perfect voters, among voters who vote in every single election, Biden's up 50-44. Okay. Among presidential year voters, Trump is up 44-43, essentially a tie. And among occasional voters, Trump is up 42-35. So a lot of those West Virginia diner voters are going to turn out to be occasional voters. It's not that conservative voters don't show up. They do. Even in these elections where Democrats are overperforming, they are showing up. It's just that Democrats are showing up a lot more because, like, regular independents, normies are not buying what the Republicans are saying. So that's the context by which they're noting that Republican primary voters are well aware of the legal drama. They're largely on Trump's side, but the breakdown for registered voters overall tells a much different story. Among that group, fewer than 40% believe the various cases are meritless. Solid majorities think they're legitimate, including some who think they're politically motivated. So you could think it's politically motivated and legitimate at the same time. I do.
Yeah.
I think Jack Smith is making a political decision to try to get a single Trump indictment as opposed to the Fonnie Willis way of doing it and trying to get it all done before the November election. I think that's a political decision.
It certainly has politics involved.
On the other hand, it's legitimate.
Yeah, right. I mean,
so I don't have any problem holding these two things, in my head at the same time.
Sure. Otherwise,
56% in both the New York and Florida cases, 55% in both the D.C. and Georgia cases think they're legitimate.
Okay.
Now, registered voters tends to reflect a more democratic sample than we see in election turnout, except when that's not true.
Oh, well, okay. It's easy,
right?
easy
so
to remember.
It's a good substitute for a general electorate. I add the except when it's not true. I mean, that's not what happened in 2022. And the Journal poll appears to have a registered voter sample that's almost evenly divided among Republicans and Democrats, which, may slant Republican. But, we're not going to get into who's slanted and break down the polls and try to look at the subgroups. That's a total waste of time.
Oh.
The bottom line, Republican primary voters appear to believe Trump when he says he's being unfairly targeted, but that doesn't general election voters aren't necessarily buying that. Doesn't mean they'll all be motivated to vote against Trump because of these cases. 37% of registered voters say the indictments make them less likely to vote for Trump. 35% say it makes no difference. But some of the registered voters say the cases are both legitimate and politically motivated, would suggest they could still be gettable for Trump on the question. Then again, that also means they could be gettable for Democrats on the question. So that's why campaigns matter. The Biden campaign hasn't started yet. And to me, that's one of the two main reasons, the other being it's too early, that you should not pay too much attention to these polls.
Okay.
The Republicans are already juiced up. They already think Trump is being targeted unfairly. Still, the best he could do against an incumbent is a tie. Biden hasn't started his campaign yet, and he starts out as a tie. It's hard to see how Trump attracts more voters. It's easy to see how Biden could attract more voters.
Yes, there seems to be more upside for him, I think.
Yeah.
But, people are crazy, so who knows?
Yeah. Meanwhile, what about Trump's rivals? There aren't any, really. This is a great story from Vanity Fair. It's great because it's a great headline, and it's a great headline because of the great sentiment.
Oh.
Ron DeSantis' 2024 team is coming apart at the seams. That's the headline.
Nice.
The blame game has become, privately at least, basically between Jeff Rowe, who's running his PAC, and his wife. Because each wants to be the campaign genius behind the strategy, and they're pointing fingers at each other. It's a wonderful story because it couldn't have happened to a better programmed entity than Ron DeSantis.
Okay. I like that. Programmed entity.
According to sources, Rowe and the DeSantis campaign are blaming each other for DeSantis' faltering candidacy. In June, I reported that Rowe had complained to people about how the campaign wasn't getting more press coverage. Trump defined the election conversation, and DeSantis focused on policy, a GOP operative said, explaining how DeSantis followed an outdated campaign playbook instead of giving GOP voters red meat. Remember, they were complaining that Casey DeSantis wasn't on the cover of Vogue and other fashion, icon magazines.
Oh, all right.
Michelle Obama was on all this stuff. How come she's not on?
Well,
she's not first lady.
Yeah. Okay, and I mean, what an odd complaint. I can't believe that Ron DeSantis isn't getting more attention for, quote-unquote, focusing on policy. I mean, the whole, to the extent that there was policy, it was emulate Trump, emulate Trump, emulate Trump.
And then try to run to the right of him, which the rest of the country hates.
And thinks is ridiculous.
Now, if the rest of the country hates it and thinks it's ridiculous and ridicules you,
even Trump supporters,
you don't look like you're the one who could wind up beating the Democrat, let alone, wind up beating Donald Trump in a primary. Jeff Rowe denied making disparaging comments about Casey DeSantis. That's absolutely flat bullshit. Even if I thought it, I wouldn't say it, and I don't think it. But sources say Rowe has also expressed frustration over the fact that DeSantis is relying so heavily on his wife for strategy advice. Oh. I didn't say a bad thing about his horrible decision to, rely on his wife for strategic advice.
Right. I didn't say not a Not a single
I
bad
never
word
said
about that idiot.
I don't think
hate
that.
so much.
And just because she's giving him horrible advice is not something I would ever say in public.
All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Right. DeSantis, meanwhile, was reportedly angry after a firm associated with Never Back Down, which is the PAC that Roe runs and owned by Roe, posted an embarrassing debate strategy memo online ahead of the first GOP debate last month. They claim they did that because they're not allowed to coordinate with the candidate, and so the only way for the candidate to get their memo is to put it out there in the news so he could read it.
Oh. Well, that's a little Trumpy, too.
Well,
maybe that was on purpose.
I'm just pointing out
that way.
That conversation and thought channel there is incredibly stupid.
Oh, well, that's going to happen when you have incredibly stupid participants.
Right. So, there's that. Meanwhile, the same dispatch has this piece, will voters buy what Vivek Ramaswamy is selling? A day in New Hampshire with the entrepreneur turned presidential candidate reveals Republican voters questions about his authenticity. I don't know if you saw it, but there's this great little clip of him standing in front of a sign that says in giant letters, truth. He's standing in front of it, and the sign fell on him.
It clunk. Yeah. I didn't see it happen, but I did see people discussing it.
Yeah, it's a one,
and they're circulating the clip. I just didn't see the clip yet.
Yeah, it's a sign from God.
Yes, right. The whole thing was put there by God and then dropped on his head.
So Vivek Ramaswamy hasn't had a post-debate surge in the polls the way Nikki Haley has, going from like 1 to 8.
I guess so. Right.
But it's given him a major confidence boost on the campaign trail, except when you actually try to nail him down about what he's saying and try to get over his gish gallop way of speaking, which is to say throw so many garbage points out there that you forget the last one and you have to try to deal with the next one. By the time you do, he's already gone on to 9 more. So RFK does that. Ramaswamy does it better. Republicans aren't buying it. He's just not going anywhere in the polls. None of them are. And like the top challenger to Trump is running like at 13, but DeSantis clearly is dropping like a stone. And, the others are picking up some of the undecideds, and they're picking up some of DeSantis's voters, but a lot of those are going to Trump. So, the primary is essentially over.
Oh, boy. All right. A year before it starts.
It's just interesting because the press needed something. They had to make Vivek Ramaswamy the next big thing after RFK bombed out and DeSantis bombed out. Yeah. So they tried him, and he's bombing out. And they're really bored, and they're really annoyed with Biden, as many of their fellow reporters have tattled on themselves, because Biden's boring, and I can't, nobody wants to buy a Biden book, and nobody wants to read a Biden article, so they have to write stupid stuff. Now, right now, Joe Biden happens to be finishing up a G20 tour where he gave a commanding, nearly 30-minute press conference outlining what's going on in the world in that region. And the best that the reporters can get out of it is at the end of this 30-minute, masterclass in modern diplomacy. Yeah. He finished up winking at the reporters saying, "That's it, I'm going to bed." And their headline was, with doubts about Biden's age, he said he's going to bed.
Oh, boy.
And it was like, what?
Yeah, well.
That's what, so when you see that and then you hear the stories about reporters being mad at Biden because he's boring and he doesn't sell, you go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
You want evidence for that? There it is. That really happened.
So that was probably the best play. You're not going to get rid of those stories, so you might as well do what you can to set up those stories as ridiculous.
Yeah, doing what he did. Actually, it was a pretty good move.
Yeah. Right, you might think that somebody would advise him, stop saying things like that. No, keep saying things like that.
No, keep saying it.
And makes the reporters look bad.
Remember my friend Adam Bass of Mass actually had a really interesting
Happy Patriots Day
local piece.
Yeah.
Local reporter. And it was about here's the title of it. Let Joe Biden be Joe Biden, voter reactions to President Biden's events. And the long and the short of it is he conducted a focus group I showed the video of Biden at Labor Day stop in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to several of my colleagues and peers around 25 years of age. Many of them worried about his age and mental acuity, and many seemed impressed with his cadence and energy at the Labor Day event. And then he got to thinking, so he actually conducted a formal focus group. He showed 2 videos to a group of 50 voters who were in their early to mid-20s from different areas of Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. These voters all expressed their intentions to vote for Biden, but all expressed similar concerns about his age. So the first was that Labor Day stop, and then the other was the Medal of Freedom event at the White House. And I asked them which video made them feel more confident about the president and if it changed their vote. And to my shock, all of them said the video of Biden at the rally was much better. Made them feel more confident, using adjectives such as lively and engaging. And the words they used to divide Biden in the second video consisted of slow, old, and unsure. And I was surprised to see how different he was in each video, a voter told me. And so while the focus group pales in comparison to high-quality polling, the results were consistent. They all said Biden looked like he had more energy and fun campaigning than he did in formal events. And so that's why his title is Let Joe Biden Be Joe Biden. It's actually a pretty good piece of advice.
Okay. I mean, probably not going to talk Joe Biden out of being Joe Biden anyway.
Well, you can't. But, his handlers don't let him get on camera and so on and so forth. Right? But let him campaign. And again, it's one of the things where campaigns matter. And so when you haven't started a campaign yet, you don't get the benefit
good point.
Of what the campaign might bring to the occasional voter.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. So I'm sure there's an argument going on saying if focus groups say that they are much more pleased with his performance when he's campaigning, why aren't we campaigning?
And I'm sure they know this. This isn't news to them. It's more about timing than anything else. A lot of this stuff is, people who weren't hired by his campaign complaining about the way the campaign is running. That's been going on forever. But then about timing. Oh, well, he's putting together $1 billion war chest, and this is the earliest we've seen a president ever spent. Well, welcome to modern political polling.
Well, that's true, too.
And political campaigning. You're not going to do it the way Harry Truman did it.
Yeah. So there will be a fight between traditionalists and others who say tradition is dead, or others who say, well, under these circumstances, given that there's not going to be a Republican
and the
primary,
others are thinking, even way, we can make a fight out of it, and whichever way he goes, we'll say he's doing it wrong.
Right, or someone will give us that quote. We can say whatever we want, but we are only allowed to say it if we get somebody else to quote it, even if it's anonymous. Right. But you know where to go to get that quote. Go to the side that the strategy that they proposed isn't being
they didn't
used.
Pick. Go to the the much more interesting quotes, and we'll get color into this story.
Right.
We don't see color, but this kind of color we see.
I see so much of it. It's everywhere. Yeah. Okay. Well.
Right. And then finally, to change topics a little bit. Well, not really. Let me give you this thread that I didn't give you, but it is right at the end of the
you better.
Pundit Roundup. So I will, yes, you better. It's from, here we go, from Julie Zebrak on Twitter.
All right.
And was sent over to me. You care about Biden's age? Read this.
All right.
Remember all of us who railed against not just Donald Trump, but also his appointees and close associates? Do you remember why those folks were just as bad as him, if not worse, and why that mattered? Because a president isn't one man doing the work. He's got influential advisors. Remember Stephen Miller?
Yes.
Remember Steve Bannon?
Sure. Right.
The
Trump
converse
isn't even
is
one
also
guy doing
true.
the work.
Biden as president is not the only man doing the excellent work is getting done. He has influential advisors, Tony Blinken on his foreign policy trip, for example, who are on the same page as he is and as Democrats are. Why does it matter? Because the president's job, whether he's 41 or 81, is carried out by not just him. His policies, which we voted for, are carried out all day in furtherance of U.S. interests. If he's meeting in the White House on guns, his policy on reproductive health is still being carried out by his administration, even if he's not in the room for it. He's the decider of hard decisions and the figurehead of the country, but he didn't do all the work alone. If he took a nap at 3 p.m., his policies and the work of the administration is still being done while he sleeps. Why am I saying this? Because his age doesn't matter. Nor, frankly, does his walking ability or his biking ability. He's actually great on a bike. What matters is how sharp he is and how he makes hard decisions and how he surrounds himself with advisors who align with why we Democrats elected him. If he's in a wheelchair and naps from 3 to 5 p.m., Governor of Texas is in a wheelchair.
True.
He still is an excellent, experienced, kind president who can do loads better in his 4th term at the White House and decades in the Senate than anyone else folks love to name as substitute candidates. So for folks to harp on his age, they're being disingenuous or they're unfamiliar with any administration and how it works. To say his age is a problem discredits all of his and his advisors' accomplishments. And to say his age is a problem also smells like a pretextual excuse for saying you don't want or trust the vice president. Frankly, I trust Biden at 84 more than I trust any other Democrat. I voted for him. His sharpness, his kindness, his experience, his values reflect my values. He's proven himself smarter and better than Trump and the GOP. His advisors likewise are smarter and better than the GOP. And also, for what it's worth, I trust the VP and her advisors and the formidable Biden advisors should anything prevent Biden from finishing his term.
All right.
She's excellent. She's sharp. She's kind. She wouldn't serve alone. She'd be surrounded by the same experts he is. To me and to you, the only thing that should matter for 2024 is who can beat Donald Trump. And for the answer, it's clear, the only one who ever has. The point is never allow Trump back in the White House. So whether the Democratic president we replace in 2028 is Biden or Harris, we can worry about that race then. What matters now and every day for the next 422 some odd days is preventing Trump and the GOP from taking back the White House. There's no dreamy magic ticket that'll beat Trump other than the real one, which is Biden-Harris, the end.
Okay. I certainly agree with that last part. There's never any dream ticket. There's always somebody's got a problem with something. So,
well, again, my view of it is that Trump is running against Biden. Biden's running against perfection. They're even. That's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, I guess that's true. That's a good way of looking at it, and that's the last way we'll look at it today. At least is with you here with us. We can look at it again differently on Wednesday, if you like. Thank you. All right, great. We're all caught up, and now we can get back to remembering things that happened 22 years ago or something like that. All right. Well, actually, I think we'll stick with the modern. Thanks, Greg. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So much going on, but all right, yeah. So as I ranted and raved about earlier, interrupting Greg's segment, yes, I mean, there's not much more to tell you, I don't think, about the fact that Glenn Youngkin is offering this pardon here, but I'll refer you to local news radio station WTOP for their story about it, and I think we pretty much covered everything and more than is actually in this article, linking it to the local state Senate race here. It does sort of astonish me how they've been hammering home over the past couple of days this Republican claim that, the Democrats are soft on crime and letting all the violent criminals go, and then somebody who's charged with, with not an ultra violent crime per se, and certainly we all understand the story behind it, and may even have some sympathy with the story behind it, but violence nonetheless, and violence against police when it comes to not hurting the right people, essentially, right? You're not cracking heads of the counter protesters and dragging them away. So I'm angry with you, and I'll defund you to the extent that you're not like with Trump. The most telling thing about the Republican perspective on Trump and police, probably, they could almost certainly use the same quote about police as they do about Trump. The most revealing thing about the Trump era and Trump voters that I think I've ever seen was the one that was quoted as saying in a story where voters were upset with Trump over something or another, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but that he had gotten off track in some fashion, and they described it, but their feelings by saying, and F their feelings, by the way, that's their own T-shirt, right? Their feelings on it were, well, he's not hurting the people who need to be hurt. He's not hurting the right people. He's hurting us. And now we're angry about that. In other words, of course, the leopards had eaten their faces. And so therefore, So they're angry with Trump for, we can get back on the right side, the right track with us by just make sure you're hurting the people we hate. And that's essentially all that's going on here in this, at this late stage of the Loudoun County case. So, all right, I probably won't read you the story, the full story of what's going on, because I think we kind of hit the highlights of it. But let's see, other stories that I might perhaps need to share with you. Let's see, there's, I guess because of the shading of the story that I gave to you by citing the example of the local Republican campaign for state Senate, tough on crime kind of message, which now doesn't work because they're pardoning people who fought with police, but only if it's okay somehow because gimme-tarianism. In surveying the other things that people have put in front of me saying they'd like to share, I think I see a link here with something that John Shiflett has sent to me from the LA Times, and thankfully he has given us the text of it because I think I run into paywall issues with the LA Times. But let's see. He actually came at it, or he was motivated to send it from a slightly different angle, saying here in his email, I thought when we talked about the ground.news rankings of news sources, we spoke about that on Thursday or Friday, I can't recall which, I think, when Scott sent us a story that was being covered that way, covered by ground.news. I thought the ground.news rankings of news sources that you featured on Thursdays, here's the answer, Thursday's show, he thought of that when he encountered this quote unquote wonderful example of a political reporter claiming the centrist objective high ground while amplifying Republican delusions. Interesting. And in the LA Times at that. Essentially, liberals are wrong about crime in big cities too, is the supposed point of the article. But I am not sure why the reporter comes to that conclusion other than the compulsive need to give a Republican pollster the final word. I don't know if this is paywalled for you, so cutting and pasting the entire article. Thank you very much. And let's see, is there a link to it? No, but I could search it and see whether there's a paywall. I'll try and provide you with, we'll want to give the link to Scott. Scott's out today. All right. Well, we'll want to give you all the link to read anyway. The whole point of that is so that you can have the link if you want to. Americans are hopelessly confused about big city crime. Partisanship is partly to blame, it says. And I guess we're all supposed to be hopelessly confused about small city crime too, because here in Loudoun County, there's no big city in Loudoun County. We're close to Washington, D.C. That's the big city, I guess. But we are nonetheless finding that Republicans are attempting to make hay, claiming that crime is rampant throughout Loudoun County, even though there's no big cities in it. But there are cities, and I guess we're supposed to point to that and say, well, everything's going to hell. And if it's not happening here in this county, it's happening in some other county, and something Democrats did it. So Noah Bierman is the writer at the Los Angeles Times who's put this thing together. Let's see. Americans think New York, right? That's right. New York City. They think New York is more dangerous than New Orleans, or Narlands, I guess, as others say, even though the Crescent City's homicide rate is 12 times higher this year. I'll bet you didn't know that. Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents rank Washington, D.C. as one of the country's safer big cities, above cities like Miami, for instance, where the homicide rate is much lower. Interesting. Republicans and Republican-leaning independents see Seattle as ominously dangerous, even though Houston has twice the homicide rate so far this year. Americans are worried about crime ahead of the 2024 elections, but few have an accurate sense of the problem, according to a Times review of crime data and a recent Gallup poll that asked adults to judge whether 16 major cities are safe places to live or visit. And I'm brought to mind of the MAGA Republican belief that multiple Democratic run, even if they're not, cities were totally leveled, burnt to the ground by Antifa during something. And why that's not a bigger story, I guess I don't know. It's amazing. You can still book flights to them. The NFL teams still play there. They still show the skyline of those cities during the broadcast of the games. but something, I guess they faked the moon landing. So you can fake entire cityscapes as well. Now, why they're still filling the stadium with local fans who were obviously all killed in the Antifa riots, I don't know, but they must be crisis actors. You get the point here. You just say whatever you want. Let's see. Los Angeles, which has the 5th lowest homicide rate so far this year among the 16 cities in the survey, and it's only the bottom third. That's not that great, but was ranked as the 3rd most dangerous. So that seems like it's a mistake. 41% of Americans described LA as a safe place to live or visit, the highest number Gallup has ever recorded for the city. I don't know. It's kind of a baffling measure, but I see what they're trying to get at here. But if you're only dealing with the universe of 16 cities, anyway. Moving on here, LA's results showed that partisanship now plays a huge role in Americans' perception of crime and safety. 64% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents ranked LA safe, while only 21% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents gave it the all clear, the biggest gap in the poll. The gap between the two coalitions' assessments of cities in the survey was 29 points on average. That's new. Political affiliation barely affected the results in 2006, the last time Gallup asked Americans about big city safety. People are bad at perceiving crime rates, said Jeff Asher, a crime data analyst and consultant who runs a widely used website. I don't think they even bothered to give him credit for the website here, but I don't see it. They're not good judges of what is or is not safe in another city. Maybe in the text over at LA Times that's linked to his website or something. Assessing cities' safety is tricky. Homicide rates spiked across the country during the pandemic and have since fallen, but are still likely to be higher this year than they were in 2019. Auto theft is surging nationally, but some cities, including Los Angeles, are experiencing a small decline, and rates for almost all types of crime have fallen since the early 1990s. Voters' opinions probably are being informed by partisanship, media portrayals, including an increase in neighborhood websites and email listservs, and factors such as public homelessness, drug use, shoplifting, and other signs of disorder, policy and political experts said. One other sign of disorder, pardoning all the criminals. But anyway, Asher called the Gallup survey the bane of my existence. The results made so little sense to him that he abandoned a column he tried to write on the subject. Asher is the crime data analyst who runs the website. Okay. Although he tracks crime closely, thank you, he says it is nearly impossible to fully characterize national trends on safety in real time, in part because FBI data on violent crime can lag years behind, and because it is difficult to define which offenses detract most from community security. Cities such as Miami and Dallas that are in states with Republican governors appeared to get a boost in their reputations for safety compared with their record, while Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York, which are in states with Democratic governors, took a hit, according to Anna Harvey, a political scientist and founder and director of the Public Safety Lab at New York University. Of course, what's really going on here, I think, is ask Democrats about safety of various cities, and they answer, maybe not particularly informed answers, but I've read some things in the newspaper maybe, or all cities have crime problems, and what do you mean by safe? Like, it's an interesting question. Like, if you ask me, is Los Angeles safe? Like, I view that as a question of not, well, is there crime in Los Angeles? Or is there even more crime in Los Angeles than there might be in, Leesburg, Virginia, or whatever I'm supposed to compare it to? I think of it in like travel warning terms. Like, would the State Department tell me, don't go to Los Angeles, you're likely to have a problem with criminal activity there? Like, no, of course not. Los Angeles on the whole is a safe place to go. And, there's crime like there is anywhere, and you never know what's going to happen. But is it like traveling in rural Central America? No, it's not. It's a totally different sort of thing. Is it like traveling in Somalia? No, also not the case. But if you ask Republicans about that. MAGA Republicans anyway. They'll tell you, no, it's just like Somalia. It's been burnt to the ground by Antifa riots, and they run, Antifa street gangs run the place. Antifa warlords run Los Angeles. And they don't even really believe that. But they will tell you that. Whereas Democrats probably answering, surveys will not tell you that. They may answer the question in terms of, is there crime versus is it a place that you need to actively avoid because the crime is rampant? But Republicans are definitely living on a different planet and answering a different question, if you ask me. All right. Back to the article here. Let's see. Where did we leave off here? Cities such as Miami. Right. Okay. So Republican cities in states run by Republican governors tend to get this boost because I guess the flip side of accusing all cities, at least cities run by Democrats with being completely, overrun by crime, is the counterpoint lie of all cities run by Republicans are heaven by comparison. All right, where were we with this? Republicans have painted Democratic-run cities as dens of crime and disorder since at least the 1960s. Candidates at the Republican presidential primary debate last month talked over one another to decry hollowed-out cities, a national identity crisis, and Democrats who have been, quote, talking about defunding the police for the last 5 years, unquote. Republican criticisms of Democratic big city leaders, and litter as well, have been bolstered by tech barons such as Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who have couched safety concerns as part of a broader argument against the, quote, woke orientation of certain cities, their ungovernability, unquote, said Richard Florida, that's his real name, a University of Toronto professor who has written extensively about trends in cities. Meanwhile, who's blowing things up in the middle of population centers? SpaceX. Anyway, GOP Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has tried to channel that energy, everyone has, in his presidential run, claiming in a recent video he posted from San Francisco, yikes, because he went there because it's so unsafe. There was money there for him to collect. Okay, whatever. Which, in a violent city full of rampant crime, how does he successfully pick up all that cash and make it out of the city without being shanghaied by roaming Antifa gangs? But anyway, he claimed in a recent video he posted from San Francisco, where he was murdered, that he saw people defecating and using crack cocaine and other drugs on the street, and warning of a collapse resulting from, quote, leftist policies. I've been someplace where apparently people were caught defecating as well, and it was the United States Capitol, and it was you guys. But hey, never mind all of that. Let's see. Fox News has, of course, reinforced those impressions with frequent segments on homelessness and drugs in the big cities on the West Coast. The political rhetoric is public nuisance crimes, Harvey said. That may not be correlated with where the most serious violent crime is happening. Yet voters do have a cause for concern, she and others say. Experts do not yet know whether homicide rates will continue to fall. Localized problems, including carjackings in New Orleans, rattle entire communities. Violent crimes, which appear to be falling, are still more common than they were in 2019, before the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, and the resulting protests, according to a July study by the Council of Criminal Justice. Harvey said Democrats should come out swinging in places where homicide and other violent crimes have subsided, such as Boston, L.A., Seattle, and San Francisco, and be more vocal that crime in Detroit, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia represents a serious policy problem that needs serious policies. People don't care about policy, of course, though, so it seems problematic. But he goes on to say, just ignoring it or trying to change the subject is not going to be an effective tactic. She said, we're talking about a different person here. I've lost track of who we were quoting here. Democrats acknowledge that the public's worries about crime are likely to hurt them more than they hurt the GOP, given that Democrats control the White House and most big city governments. It really has nothing to do with that. It's easy to attack Democrats and acceptable thing to do, and Republicans tend to get a pass on that stuff. Only 35% of people in an NPR Marist survey conducted in March said President Biden was doing a good job handling crime, a lower mark than his already low approval rating. He earned similarly poor marks from people of color and those under 45, voters he needs to motivate if he wants to win re-election. What you've got to do, here's what you got to do. Ready? Is say, hey, I know it's a serious issue, and here's what I've done, said John Anzalone, a Democratic pollster who I guess hasn't been hired this time, but has worked for Biden, pointing to a mayor's work in hiring and recruiting police and taking guns off the streets as examples. Republicans are not about to let up. Whit Ayers, a veteran Republican pollster, pointed to an effort by residents in the higher income Buckhead neighborhood, that's Buckhead with a B, neighborhood of Atlanta earlier this year to secede from the city, which he said was driven by fear of crime and also by romanticization of the Civil War, I would say. Georgia has become a crucial swing state in presidential elections and in recent elections for control of the Senate. Ayers argues that catapults the issue into national importance, and he scoffs at those who say his party is overhyping it. Except they lost both Senate seats and a special grand jury, in addition to recommending other indictments and charges. Also, by the way, recommended that there be charges laid against the two then Republican senators who then went on to lose their elections. Just thought I would point that out. Tell that to people who are scared to go shopping at Lenox Mall in Buckhead, he said. Those people are idiots, obviously. They are not making that up, and having some economist or political analyst downplay their fear, I'm doing that now, is a good way to whistle past the graveyard for Democratic candidates. My oh my. Well, okay. Not really a super great assessment of things, but a partisan one, certainly. Let's see. By the way, John adds, this message at the end. Let's see. Identifier of the very inside the Beltway stenographer for Republicans who thinks he is an objective, nonpartisan centrist. Noah Bierman, the writer, is an enterprise reporter focusing on clashes between red and blue states in the Washington bureau for the Los Angeles Times. He previously covered the White House and wrote for the paper's national desk. In case you were wondering who was behind that somewhat problematic article, let's say. Okay, let's see. Let's get back into the inbox here in case anything else comes in. And I should be checking in on what's happening on the social media sites, but I have forgotten to this point. So let's check the KITM hashtag on Ye Old Bird site and see what I may have missed, but things are slowing down there as everybody migrates out to the other alternative social media sites, and I didn't remember to open all of that this morning as I was cutting it close to the wire, getting back to the microphone. But all right, let's have them open and see what we've got here. Ricky chiming in from Kazakhstan, as she likes to call it, back at the opening of the show when we were marveling at the boldness with which the Saudi social media strategists were commenting way back on the original 9/11. Yeah, Air Canada, she says, actually does fly over Toronto. I imagine that they do, yeah. I have had an amazing view of the CN Tower from an Air Canada flight. Porter Airlines also lands in the middle of the city, right below the tower on Toronto Island on Lake Ontario. Now, I wasn't saying that the Saudis were photoshopping that shot. It was almost certainly just a nice stock photo. Otherwise, why? Well, first of all, I don't think they were talking about, well, I don't know what they were trying to hint, I guess. But it's not that they would have had to have hijacked an Air Canada plane in order to do this. But it was more the message, like, you might say it was a sensitive time, and maybe it wasn't a great time for Saudis to be threatening to fly planes into buildings in Canada. I mean, the shot by itself would have been viewed as, well, why is he showing us a plane landing in Canada? Who cares? It was the message, obviously, who went along with it. So anyway, yes, I guess that's true. They didn't have to Photoshop that or anything like that. Anyway, let's see. Catching up on this and other things. Anything happening on Blue Sky that we don't know about? Oh, well, we can tip the hat to Mighty OCD, letting everybody know that the show is live. Thank you very much for taking care of that. All right, that leaves us free to dive back into Pocket and see what else there is to share. Man, there's a lot of super dumb things and then some other stuff that we'll have to get to. Let's see, maybe because I mentioned or I used the popular phrase about leopards eating faces, I could share this story with you. Marcos wrote this over at Daily Kos the other day. I thought it was somewhat interesting. Leopards ate the face of this conservative Idaho community. I thought it was an interesting story. He did too. Maybe you saw it. Published it it's a week ago. Last Sunday. So maybe you've seen it by now, but we haven't noted it. West Bonner County, Idaho, is where this is happening. And like most of the state, it is Trump country. The 4-time indicted former president won 73% of the vote in the county in 2020. And following their MAGA instincts, county voters swept in a radical right-wing school board, back to the school board issue, in their November 2021 elections. Not unlike what we did here in Virginia. Not sweeping in a new school board, but sweeping in a new idiot governor who promised to attack the school board. Anyway, after seeing those two board members work diligently to destroy their schools, county voters overwhelmingly recalled them last Tuesday. I guess 2 Tuesdays ago now. The big 60% recall vote underscored the depth of disgust this conservative community felt for electing candidates who delivered exactly what they promised to do. And yet, weirdly, they didn't like conservative governance when it affected them directly. Defending themselves in a voter guide, recalled board chair Keith Rutledge wrote, quote, "Your vote today will determine the future of our district. Voting against my recall will help keep a conservative majority on the school board that is working hard to improve the outcomes for our district's children," except they're working on anything but. "Voting for my recall will hand control of our district over to the very same people who are responsible for the 60% reading competency rates and call that a success." Rutledge's defense was, "Oh no, the liberals." Vice Chair Susan Brown, also recalled, was even more unhinged in her voter statement, where she wrote, "If you want a board member who will fight for financial transparency, work to keep our schools free of woke agendas, and demand educational outcomes better than 60% competency for our children, vote against the recall." And of course, the messaging here is woke, woke, woke. Man, no one is buying that woke crap anymore, are they? Their campaign website declared, "Keep the board conservative, vote against the leftist-backed recall." And no one bought that either. So what did these two school board members do to merit the wrath of their conservative community? You might wonder. For one thing, they lobbied for the defeat of a supplement school funding levy. I would say supplemental, probably school funding levy. Voters rejected the measure, which cost the district $4.7 million, a third of their budget. No organization can survive that kind of financial hit without serious consequences. As the recall organizers argued, Rutledge and Brown failed to uphold their oaths of office to improve public schools. Don't respect their constituents, that's probably true, or fellow board members, that's definitely true, and have shown a lack of concern for student education. You don't improve anything by decimating its budget. In addition, they hired a school superintendent, Brandon Durst. Let's go, Brandon Durst, who had zero experience either as a teacher or school administrators, but he had plenty of experience as a culture warrior at the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Don't know anything about it? Well, as Co says, it's just as awful as you think it is. The top education headlines on their website hyperventilate about Boise schools, quote, affirming new sexual identities of genderqueer, pansexual, and non-binary, and cry about woke pre-K and childcare providers, focus on bathroom policy nonsense, and pine for Florida-style education reforms that are gutting that state's supply of teachers. In fact, one of the headlines on their sites hails West Bonner School District for implementing a transphobic bathroom policy. I can't imagine what it might be like growing up trans or queer in West Bonner. Must be awfully difficult. He's right about that. Durst wasn't hired to improve educational outcomes. The guy clearly has no clue what he's doing, but to implement a culture war agenda with zero relevance to educating students. In fact, Durst is literally not qualified for the position, as Idaho requires 4 years of full-time certified experience working with students while under contract with an accredited school. Durst's application has to get a waiver from the State Board of Education just to qualify for the job, and that hasn't even happened yet. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And welcome back to Scott Anderson, who sends me the note that, it's next Monday, I guess, that you're out. I guess I was just looking at the calendar last night. And all right, well, that's good news. Saves me a bit of work today. And just so nobody thinks, he's out wandering the streets or anything. All right, well, good. He's on the job today. And on somebody else's job who pays a lot better on Monday. Okay. Well, that's going to be my pitch for the day, right? If we raise tons and tons of money, we could pay Scott enough that he wouldn't have to do anybody else's work. So if we could just turn him into a billionaire or even just a millionaire, that would be helpful, and he'd have a lot more time on his hands. Okay, well, all right, never mind. Anyway, reminder for everybody, though. Patreon, patreon.com/KagroX. Easy way to sign up for monthly recurring contributions to support the show. And always very much welcome. And plus, we call your name out on the show and say what a wonderful person you are for joining. And we even make a practice of not calling out the people who eventually cancel, as sometimes do, because you never know, and it's totally unfair, and you can't do things that way. But we appreciate everybody who signs up and joins us, and that we celebrate when it happens. And I don't know, people seem to enjoy that. So, think about it that way. And, it's not an expensive show to sponsor in a meaningful way. A couple of bucks a month by a large percentage of the number of people who are actually downloading the show each day will do the trick where, and we're running consistent with most online promotions, I think, getting about 10% of the number of people who actively download the show daily or some show daily. They don't always download that day's show. But if 1,000 to 1,500 people are downloading a show each day, about 150 are sponsoring us with monthly recurring contributions. And if you think about the number of things on which you're willing to, throw away 99 cents on a frivolous download, or pay $1.50 for, a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven, never mind the fancy kind that people are paying $5 a day for. But if you are able to say, yeah, you know what, I'm enjoying the 2 hours of entertainment 5 times a week for years on end, why don't I put something in the jar here, whether it's 99 cents to $1 a day, or even just a couple of times, $1 for every day of the week during which you broadcast, or something like that. That would be tremendous. We are that would pay for an awful lot. Actually, if a larger percentage of the people who were downloading the show with regularity were doing that, I don't know, we would celebrate it. Things would be fantastic, and wonderful things would happen, and a lot of that would be reflected in passing some of that on to Scott. So he'll cheer for that. I got to bring you back to the news, because that's what you're really here for. But it does pay to let everybody know what's going on in the background here. I left off in the middle of Marcos' story about what was happening in West Bonner, Idaho, or at least the West Bonner School District. Is that the name of the town as well? I got to scroll back to the top to see what's going on here. Yep, West Bonner County, Idaho. And let's see, we left off in right ahead of, first of all, the story that they had hired a school administrator there. Is it a superintendent that they hired? School superintendent Brandon Durst, an accomplished culture warrior, but somebody who had no experience in the classroom or even administering schools, even though the law requires that school administrators and school superintendents actually do have that experience. It requires a waiver to put him in the job, and they haven't even gotten that waiver yet. One of the dissenting school board members in that decision, Carlin Barton, set the stage for the subsequent recall effort of the other two members with her fierce opposition to Durst's hiring on June 29th. Then the quote from that saying, "From the research I have done, the superintendent candidate that was voted in is not currently qualified or able to fulfill all the duties of a public school superintendent, even with an emergency certification. The direction of our board has turned into a fascist dictatorship with an agenda which is far from our conservative point of view and no way to unite the school board employees of this district or community. The direction or agenda that has been kept from the members, not only from the board, but our community." All right, a little confusing at the end there, but interesting parallel to a lot of things. Just one of those things where, I don't know, the law is pretty clear, right? You have to have this amount of experience with education in order to be a school superintendent in this state. And once again, we're left scratching our head. It's very interesting that we have to sue our way into enforcing the 14th Amendment with Donald Trump. It says right here that if you've taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution and then you engage in insurrection against it, then you are disqualified for running for public office, running or holding public office from the presidency on down. And gee whiz, we don't know, and who makes the call, and I'm not sure, and this, that, and the other thing, all these. But here, the law is pretty clear here. You can't be the school superintendent. Oh, well, but we voted to say he is. So what do we do? Do we sue? Do we not sue? Who has standing? I don't know. Gee whiz. Well, there's a lot of examples of these things happening. And as it turns out, none of them are self-executing after all. So it's hard to blame them for not, pretending that the 14th Amendment part is self-executing either. Even though the legal analysts who've talked about it say it's supposed to be, but what does self-executing mean anyway? Anyhow, back to what Marcos was saying about this. Weird, huh? They vote for fascist MAGA types and then wonder why the people they elected are acting like fascists. Not that we should expect deeper reflection. Another quote in here that says, Dana Douglas, the chairwoman of Recall, Replace, Rebuild, described herself as a conservative Christian. She said the takeover of the school board the school district is an example of what can happen when parents and voters do not pay close enough attention. It could happen anywhere, Douglas said, even though, it seems like the sort of thing that they would ordinarily cheer for, but as we said, leopards have eaten their faces and they can't believe it. It's the lone wolf theory applied to politics, Marcos says. You see, the problem wasn't conservatism. It was just these two rogue actors who are hurting the wrong people, as we learned that's what they mean by everything, right? We cheer for Trump because he hurts the people we want to hurt. They'd have no trouble with conservatives at the State Board of Education, say, arbitrarily cutting Boise's school budget by a third. Those people deserve it. Those kids aren't even all white. West Bonner conservatives just don't like it when they themselves suffer the consequences of conservative ideology. Still, Marco says, this made me laugh. This quote here, "This community is not going to back down," Turner said. "We are awake now, and we are going to stay awake." Yep. That is totally not woke. It's awake, not woke. Completely different, right? Okay, got it? There's a PS here and a PPS as well. The local MAGA crowd declared that the election, the recall one, which was successfully chucked these two out, was, of course, you guessed it, fraudulent. And from commenter Lincoln Green, there's even more to the story. The comment here that is quoted says the election results aren't official until certified. Right. Okay. Well, it's fraudulent. So, of course, that leaves this open. The results aren't official until certified, and that won't happen until this Thursday, which I guess was last Thursday. We should check in and see how they did with that. So the Lame Duck Board scheduled a meeting for Friday of last week with the agenda being, ready for this one, rather than waiting around for the results to be certified and then throw these two members off the board. Before that happens, the board meets and they voted to dissolve the school board, or at least the agenda was dissolve the school board and then turn the meeting over to their superintendent buddy, the one who's not qualified to be superintendent, self-executing prohibition against him. Then they would nominate and elect a new chairman. Essentially, the Lame Duck Board was scheming to overturn the election, the recall election. The winners of the election barely managed to stave off the coup by getting a restraining order on Friday from a Bonner County judge to delay all school board actions until after the election is certified. Wow. That's how MAGA people work. They don't want elections. They don't want the people to rule. They want MAGA rule. That's a good one to keep an eye on, and a very crystalline local example of things that are happening everywhere. Just as, the snakes are eating themselves, the leopards are eating their own faces in Idaho, and of course the gerrymandering being used to save the gerrymandering, as we discussed last week, in Wisconsin. All right, let's see. A couple of other stories to bring to your attention. There are many directions we can go in. Some of them are extremely long reads. Some of them, pretty much all of them. Let's see. But things I gotta, here's one, a quick one that I just gotta put on the record because I love collecting the stories of Republican weirdo outrages that have no basis in reality. Like over the weekend, Elon Musk made, online headlines again in retweeting something from, was it Ian Miles Chong? They're convinced that, I guess this is the new litter boxes story, but it was just like one of their memes, proclaiming the absolute obvious truth of the very hardcore fact that all over America, school teachers are teaching their kids that capitalism is bad, communism is good, and wokeism is the best thing that has ever happened, and yada yada. Using their usual meme illustrations to insist that this was the case, and Elon retweeting this thing and saying, "This is true. This is happening all over America. Most parents aren't aware." Of course, I don't know how aware he is of any of this. I don't know if any of his kids go to public school. I don't know if they go to school at all. And of course, he names them things like, I don't even remember what the stupid names are, but everybody was remembering how dumb, how he's given his kids wacko names and how interesting it is that, your pronouns are invalid, but my kid's name is AEX12 or whatever the hell it was that he... I don't know. There was a Roman, and one of them was Roman numerals, and the newest one to be revealed was Techno Mechanica or something. Like, all right, fine, I guess so. Sure, all fine. Anyway, right. So again, I remind everybody that the litter box thing, like my personal view on the litter box thing, I like to remind people that these were the people you're arguing with over litter boxes are the people who used to say back in the day that, for instance, you're disqualified from participating in the public debate about guns if you accidentally say clip when you meant magazine. So you don't know the terminology. You're disqualified from the debate. Well, obviously, anybody who swore on a stack of Bibles that they totally heard from their sisters, cousins, uncles, whatever, that there were definitely litter boxes in the public schools not in their district, but in the one next over from the one where I have a cousin who used to date a guy who They swore that they staked everything on the fact that there really were litter boxes. I think they're disqualified from the debate, but they just keep coming back with crazier and crazier things. And Elon Musk, who's an idiot, believes these things as well, and whatever. But here's a new one that, just in case this comes up. The Maddo blog has got this story. Steve Bannon, always on the case, just in case you hear this one at some point, or you probably won't hear it because Ron Johnson is just, kind of an idiot, and occasionally he breaks through into the news, and he's from Wisconsin. We're focusing on Wisconsin. Just wanted to let you know the things that people say to one another, and they nod. Yeah. He's a serious guy. Why Ron Johnson suggested that windmills, and we all know that Republicans hate windmills because it's renewable energy, and that's bad because they're being paid by the fossil fuel people, and you can't have competitors because communism is good and capitalism is bad. Weren't they just saying that was a complaint that they had? Anyway, you can't have competition because of how good capitalism is, I guess. Anyway, what are windmills doing now? Now, you thought it was crazy and you were right, when Donald Trump, famous idiot, said, windmills cause ear cancer. What? Is there even ear cancer? I don't know. But they make a sound and it gives you ear cancer or maybe brain cancer or some kind of cancer. They're ramming the ramparts, took over the airports. By the way, does that not disqualify you from debate to say that the Continental Army took over the airports? Anyway, Ron Johnson says windmills are killing whales. Yeah, because everyone knows the oceans are full of rotating turbines that are killing whales. They are full of rotating turbines, by the way. The propellers of ships, they're, I guess, occasionally hitting whales, but that's not what they're talking about. Windmills are killing whales, and it's probably, I'm going to guess that it's the same thing. They don't like the windmills that are out, the windmill farms out in the ocean where there's lots of wind. They're always complaining. Windmills don't work. They can't generate electricity. What if there's no wind? Well, what if there was a place where there's kind of always wind? Oh, well, then they won't work because they're killing whales, because the whales are jumping into the turbine. Now, I imagine that they're saying they're causing vibrations in the water, which, maybe. I don't know. Are they killing whales? Ocean's kind of full of vibrations. I think the whales are used to other vibrations, but let's see what they're saying. I'm curious to know. It was in early 2021 when the New York Times described Senator Ron Johnson as the Republican Party's foremost amplifier of conspiracy theories and disinformation. It's unfortunate. Of course, you may remember that he was the guy who tried to engineer the actual physical turning over of the fake elector ballots directly to Vice President Pence and couldn't get that done, but that's interesting. Anyway, so yeah, he's the foremost amplifier of conspiracy theories and disinformation. It's unfortunate how much effort the Wisconsin senators put into proving the assessment correct. Johnson has cultivated a truly cringeworthy record, peddling bizarre claims about COVID-19 and the January 6th attack and Russian disinformation and the 2020 presidential election. But let's not forget, because it's the day to not forget, that the GOP senator has a bizarre perspective on the climate crisis, too. An embedded tweet makes that point with a video of his appearance on Fox News. Johnson appeared on Fox News Sunday, where viewers initially heard guest host Dagan McDowell, is that a real name? Dagan? All right. Launch into an odd rant about the Biden administration, because it's Fox, pushing a, quote, racist agenda in sub-Saharan Africa because the White House supports a solar project in Angola. And of course, as you know, solar energy, famously racist. Don't use it in Africa. It's bad. I don't know. Anyway, that merely paved the way for the Wisconsin Republican to endorse climate denialism. as he did as follows. Dworkin, there are 1,600 scientists from around the world that just joined in declaration with dash, change of subject, led by 2 Nobel laureates that said, we are not in a climate emergency, that all this climate change alarmism is based on bad science, completely ignoring the impact of clouds to basically be a heat sink. Everyone's ignoring the clouds, yes. Again, the climate has always changed, always will. I'm not an alarmist. I'm not in denial, but we have spent over $5 trillion globally on climate change. We haven't moved the needle, according to climate alarmists. How much more are we going to waste? These windmills, according to an earlier report on your network, are killing the whales. I don't remember seeing that report either, and maybe no one did because it might not even have existed, but let's find out about that. Although, again, I wonder, like, no one answered. It's Fox, so obviously they're not going to challenge him on it, but you might say, like, well, I don't understand what's bad science about saying Angola could build a solar power station. Like, what's the bad science there? I mean, solar power is real, right? Everyone acknowledges that. It works just fine. It's not, I don't know, it's not burning fossil fuels. That's the real point of it. But I mean, all right, let's pretend there's no climate crisis. What's the argument against collecting free electricity from God? If you're a Republican, you're going to answer it describe it that way. The sun is shining. It can make electricity. We have lots of that. We don't have to pay any money to import it or refine it or anything like that. It's just coming down from the sky. Why don't we collect it? Because what's the reason? I mean, the windmills, I understand you're going to make a story about windmills killing whales. You need to tell me why solar power is killing the whales if you want to talk me out of this one. But of course he realized, no, that's dumb. I don't have anything for that, so I'll just switch to windmills. And because this is Fox, they're not going to say, wait a minute, the question was solar power. Why are you talking about windmills? And the answer is, it's both things are favored by liberals, so I'm just switching because I can, because our viewers hate both, because liberals like both. Anyway, the senator added that those who believe climate science are driven by the desire to take control over our lives. Sun is shining, control over life. True. He went on to suggest that the focus on the climate is, quote, why we are experiencing inflation. That's the real reason. Not the fact that we're burning more and more oil and the oil costs more and more because we're running out of it. Now, let's say it didn't cause global warming. We're still kind of running out of it. I mean, there's plenty, I guess, still to do plenty of damage with anyway. But free electricity, who doesn't want that? I never really understood that. To be sure, it's not easy to pack this much nonsense in a short amount of time, but the Republican Party's foremost amplifier of conspiracy theories and disinformation is a special kind of politician. There's probably little value in fact-checking every error of fact and judgment that Johnson presented to Fox News' audience, although I'm certainly curious about the lawmakers' cloud-related ideas, but I find myself stuck on the idea that windmills are killing the whales. Why exactly would Johnson think that? Or more specifically, why would he take seriously Fox's coverage suggesting that whales are dying as a result of windmills? Evidently, this idea has been percolating in conservative circles and Republican-aligned media for much of the year, though the evidence to support the claims doesn't appear to exist. CNN reported in January on a spate of whale deaths off the coast near New York and New Jersey, noting scientists say there is no evidence to support a connection between the deaths and local offshore wind farms. So in other words, there's no evidence to support that, but there's no evidence to say that I can't say that there might be evidence found later, even if we haven't found it now, I guess. The Annenberg Public Policy Center came to the same conclusion 2 months later, quoting an expert in marine conservation technology saying there's basically zero chance that there's a connection between the two. But here we are. In April, the Department of Energy issued findings of research from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Marine Mammal Commission, and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, which collectively found, quote, no evidence to support speculation that noise resulting from wind development-related site characterization surveys could potentially cause mortality of whales, and no specific links between recent large whale mortalities and currently ongoing surveys. To be sure, this isn't the weirdest rhetoric Republicans have ever peddled in opposition to wind power. That award still goes to Trump, who told members of the National Republican Congressional Committee in 2019 that the noise caused by wind turbines might cause cancer. But 4 years later, the right's windmill-related rhetoric clearly isn't getting any better. So there you go. It's causing whale cancer, is, I guess, their claim. And, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Why do they deny science, et cetera, et cetera? Just wanted to sort of put that on your radar because you never know when that's going to crop up. Let's see. Other things that I should share with you. What can we fit? Well, not that much. So we'll save some of these things for later in the week. And I'll give you some other weird, outrageous things. Let's see. I mentioned Elon Musk and his nonsense from over the weekend. We made mention, I think, at the end of last week. I guess we read the story about, or began reading the story anyway, about the Starlink situation. Didn't we? Didn't we do that? I think so. We probably didn't finish that story, but, we were talking about, that's the hottest story. And I guess because there's a new biography of Elon Musk out, and I guess that's where we distilled that, or the second round of interest in that story. And I mentioned to you that I thought I had read something earlier, and I did find that, or at least the most likely source of that for me was Ronan Farrow's article from late August, about, entitled Elon Musk's Shadow Rule, how the U.S. government came to rely on the tech billionaire and is now struggling to rein him in. And I think, Ronan makes mention of this story of the necessity of Starlink to successfully prosecute the war against Russia by Ukraine. And the rest of the world, as it turns out. And so anyway, now this new biography brings this up, and it was another opportunity to reiterate the story. And as it turns out, weirdly, the apologists turned out to be the biographer of Elon Musk. Spent the weekend saying, it was Walter Isaacson, I think, who said, no, there's been a misunderstanding. All these people who say that Elon Musk turned off Starlink so that Ukraine couldn't carry out this submarine drone attack, right? You remember, I'm pretty sure we definitely did mention this at the end of last week. That's all coming back to me, unless it was all a dream. Anyway, it wasn't that he turned off Starlink. It's that Starlink was never actually activated over Crimea, and the Ukrainians asked him to turn it on so that they could coordinate this attack, and he declined to get actively involved in that part of the hostilities, you see, somehow. And it is kind of different, but the weirdest thing happened. Then somebody read the book and said, it's weird, Walter, because in the book, you actually quite clearly say the opposite, which is why we all drew this conclusion. You say that Starlink, that Elon Musk very specifically turned it off in order to prevent this. And then you present that as some sort of heroic intervention against war. And then when people read your book and said, oh, well, okay, he must be right about this because he's spent a lot of time reporting on it and he had unfettered access to Elon Musk, and Musk must have told him that he did this, and he celebrated it as Elon did. And I don't think he's had an answer for that just yet, but everybody's sort of wondering, I don't understand, Walter, you told us that he specifically turned it off, and now that looks bad, and so you're running around saying there's a clarification. It sounds like maybe the clarification isn't really true, but Elon Musk fed that to you, and you still sort of, your fates are linked because you got to sell this book, and if he withdraws his endorsement of the book, maybe you don't sell as many, so anyway, that's what he did with it. He decided over the weekend to issue this revised version of the story, and I guess nobody's really buying it. So, okay, I thought that was of interest, and I have let's see, there's the latest reporting on that comes from the Washington Post, which I will include in the roundup so that you can see what's going on, and some of the social media based criticism of Walter Isaacson that resulted, so that you can trace the provenance of that. Okay, time for us to wrap it up here. There's plenty of good long form stories to bring to you. Oh, There is one that perhaps I can summarize quickly over the music as we exit, and not even shortchange Justice that much about what he's got coming up. I just thought another ridiculous story that I guess goes in the columns with the windmills, etc., even though no Republican politicians, as near as I can make out, are involved in it. Just, another one of those weird panics that go on among, strange people who are susceptible to these kinds of claims. BBC News reporting 3 days ago from out of where? I don't know, in Lincolnshire. This is interesting. The police descended on the North Sea Observatory in Chapel St. Leonard's, Lincolnshire on Wednesday night on reports that some witnesses had uncovered the results of a ritual mass murder scene. Apparently, bodies lying around motionless with candles lit nearby, and this horrific murder scene discovered by passersby who had in fact peered through the window at the ending of a yoga class when everyone was relaxing at the end and lighting candles and lying motionless, recovering from their exertions of yoga. Obviously, a ritual mass murder, a bloodless mass murder, of course. But that was only because all the adrenaline had been drained out of these people and used for ritual satanic pedophilia somewhere else. Anyway, the cops showed up and everyone was fine. In fact, they were quite relaxed and loose and able to explain to them that no, they had only been practicing yoga. But just sort of some of the things that people panic about, or I guess imagine is happening elsewhere, both in Los Angeles and around the world, I guess. Mass murder everywhere. Look out.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, of course, we did shortchange Justice in his preview of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. We can give you this. Let's see. 13 presidential libraries dating back to Herbert Hoover have released a statement calling for a recommitment to the country's bedrock principles, just as we learn more about a plot hatched by Trump allies to destroy the federal government as we know it. Stay tuned.